NFL free agency has just continued to have banger after banger after banger. So today, let's do my second part of grading the biggest signings of free agency. So if you guys have not checked out my last grading video, I'll go ahead and have that one pinned up at the very end. Make sure you guys check that out. In that video, we talk about signings like Kirk Cousins and Christian Wilkins. Today, we'll talk about some of the more recent free agency moves. Without further ado, let's hop in. And we are going to begin with the Calvin Ridley to the Tennessee Titans move. It was a 4-year, $92 million deal with just over $45 million of it guaranteed. Now, the nice thing about this deal is there appears to be a potential out after 2 years, $48 million is through. And in totality, I understand the move. I just personally don't love the move. Yes, next year, the Tennessee Titans are going to have a pretty nasty receiving room with guys like Treylon Burks, Calvin Ridley, and DeAndre Hopkins. I actually like the team they have next year. Yes, they need to fix the offensive line, but they have decent running backs. The defense is solid. I kind of like what can be next year, but I don't think they're going to do much. What I will say is this does give Will Levis the true opportunity to prove that he is the long-term answer at that position. My biggest concern with this move is that Calvin Ridley has never proven to be a true wide receiver one. He's been a very good wide receiver at times. Obviously, his last year in Atlanta was very impressive, and last year with Jacksonville, it didn't work out. However, some of that was his fault and some of it wasn't his fault. It was kind of a weird relationship down there. But to give a 29-year-old wide receiver who's going to be 33 by the time this contract is fully over with, assuming that he stays on the team, and you're going to give him $23 million per year, seems to me like a pretty hefty contract. Calvin Ridley has never proven to be a true wide receiver one, and you're paying him as if he is one. So in my opinion, I don't hate the contract. I think a lot of the contracts this year are pretty solid. This one, in my opinion, is just okay. I'm going to give it a C-. Next up, we are going to talk about Arik Armstead going to the Jacksonville Jaguars on a 3-year, $51 million deal. Now, Arik Armstead is not the same guy that he used to be. Yes, he's still a very, very good interior defensive lineman who can also play on the outside, but he's also not somebody who I would expect to go out there and get you 15 sacks in a year. That's just not really his game. However, the Jacksonville Jaguars did need somebody to plug in at the defensive tackle spot. Arik Armstead can definitely do that. You now have a defensive line with guys like Trayvon Walker and now Arik Armstead that I actually think could be pretty nasty next year. And paying him $17 million per year is, in my opinion, a relatively good contract for somebody who's going to be very good until his contract is up. This is not a situation like you're signing somebody who's going to be good for 1 year and then you trade him or get rid of him. He's going to be somebody who will be on this team for quite some time. And like I said, I like this move a lot. I'm going to give it a solid B+. Next up, we're going to talk about Darnell Mooney going from the Chicago Bears to the Atlanta Falcons on a 3-year, $39 million deal. I like this move for some reason a lot, not because I think Darnell Mooney has to be a wide receiver one on this Falcons team, but because they have Drake London, he can be that wide receiver two and really play off nicely to what the strengths of Drake London are. Darnell Mooney is a smaller, undersized wide receiver who plays kind of similar to a guy like Tank Dell. However, Tank Dell is obviously better. You now give Darnell Mooney, in my opinion, his best quarterback of his career in Kirk Cousins, to go along with having a genuinely really good wide receiver one run mate in Drake London, and of course Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. Getting a guy like Darnell Mooney who can really use his speed and his athleticism to his advantage in this offense is, in my opinion, very smart. He's only 26 years old. He's only making $13 million per year. Plus, if it doesn't work out, he has a 2-year potential out. So worst case scenario, you have to pay the guy for 2 years. Then eventually you can cut him or just trade him or do whatever with him. I like this move a lot as a piece that can add along this offense to even make it more explosive. In a lot of my mock drafts, I've considered taking a wide receiver with the Atlanta Falcons top 10 pick, but that was just because they didn't have a really good wide receiver 2 next to Drake London. Now that you actually have that guy in Darnell Mooney, you don't really have to do that, so you can focus more of your attention along the defensive line. So that being said, it answers not just the wide receiver 2 position, but it also helps your defensive line room potentially. So for that being said, I'm going to give this one a solid B+ as well. Next up, I want to talk about Gardner Minshew going from the Indianapolis Colts to the Las Vegas Raiders on a 2-year, $25 million deal. It's him about $12.5 million per year. What I will say about Gardner Minshew is he's one of, if not the best backup quarterback in the NFL. And I think if worst case scenario, the Raiders have to start him for a year or two, it will work out really nicely for them because he's truly a really solid quarterback in the league. Again, is he a all-pro, even realistically a Pro Bowl level quarterback? Not really. I know he made the Pro Bowl last year, but be freaking for real, that was just that was kind of a joke. But let's back level quarterback where he can be really solid, and last year he proved that in Indianapolis. Granted, I do think the Shane Steichen system really helped him. Obviously, he was with the Philadelphia Eagles under Shane Steichen, so it was a natural fit with him in Indianapolis. Whereas I feel like him going to the Raiders offense, I don't know if it's quite the same fit. However, Gardner Minshew is a dang good quarterback, and I would trust him for a year or two on that team. Not to mention, the Raiders are likely going to be taking a quarterback in their first round of either this year's draft or next year's draft. So if for some reason Gardner Minshew can't be the starter next year, he's going to be a very good backup and a very good mentor for whoever is the long-term solution at the quarterback spot. So that is a Bo Nix or somebody next year. I really like the direction the Raiders are going with at the quarterback position. With that being said, I'm going to give it a solid A-. Next up, I want to talk about the Tyron Smith signing to the New York Jets. And let me get this out of the way. This is a very smart move for the New York Jets. The Jets were in a situation where they had to fix up their offensive line desperately bad with not only veterans, but even some young guys potentially in the draft. Getting a guy like Tyron Smith really can transform that offensive line from being one of the worst last year to even being a really good offensive line next year. They also brought in Morgan Moses, who's going to be playing at the right tackle spot. Get Tyron Smith, who's going to fill in at the left tackle spot. So basically, you filled up both your tackle spots. What I will say is both those guys are relatively older, so you're probably still likely going to take a tackle at some point in this year's draft to be the long-term answer. But getting Tyron Smith on a 1-year, $6-ish million per year basis with a contract worth up to $20 million based off incentives is, in my opinion, a damn good deal. When healthy, Tyron Smith is one of, if not the best left tackle in the league. I will say one of. He's not better than Trent Williams, but he is up there as one of those legit studs in the league. He has injury concerns, and that's the one issue on this guy that I actually do fear a lot for this Jets team is what happens if he does have an injury during the offseason or even during a game. Last year was honestly like the 1 year in the past like 5 years that he's been really healthy, and even then he missed a couple games last year for the Cowboys. For Dallas, by the way, I actually don't really hate the idea of moving on from him and actually addressing the left tackle spot in the draft, but for the New York Jets, you needed to fix it up, especially with Aaron Rodgers being there. I like this move a lot. I'm gonna give it the best score you can possibly get at an A+. Next up, I want to talk about Jonah Jackson, the offensive guard for the Detroit Lions, going to the LA Rams on a 3-year, $51 million deal. Again, this is a contract where there is a potential out after 2 years, and what I will say is this is a smart move for the LA Rams. They were able to bring back their other offensive guard. Now you bring in Jonah Jackson to fill in at either the right guard. I'd imagine the left guard makes sense. However, for the LA Rams, protecting Matthew Stafford is obviously the #1 priority on this team. Getting him for a relatively cheap contract makes a lot of sense. Yes, he's had some injury concerns. However, I'm truly just not that concerned about him long term. Jonah Jackson is one of the more impressive defensive guards in the league when healthy. He's really stout in the run game, really good and solid in pass protection. Is he Zach Martin or is he one of those top level offensive linemen? No. However, he usually plays up to his contract and will play just as good as you need him to be. So in my opinion, getting him for 3 years, locking him up long term, especially when he's only 27 years old, makes a ton of sense. You're going to continue to prolong Matthew Stafford as long as you can. So with that being said, I'm going to give this one a solid B+. Next up, let's talk about Danielle Hunter going to the Houston Texans on a 2-year, $49 million deal. This was essentially the Jonathan Grenard replacement. Jonathan Grenard obviously left Houston to go to Minnesota. So in turn, the Minnesota Vikings give Danielle Hunter to Houston. Kind of weird how that worked out, but it just so happened to end up that way. And in my opinion, this one is a really good move. Danielle Hunter has been one of the more consistent players in the league, especially when healthy. Last year, he had a fantastic year for the Minnesota Vikings. And now you have a proven veteran to go along with Will Anderson. I think this will only help Will Anderson in his future, getting a guy like Danielle Hunter, who's a tad bit older than Jonathan Grenard. He's only 29 years of age, and by the time the contract is up, he's going to be 31. I think it's going to be 2 very productive years for the Houston Texans. My one complaint is I wish this was a 3-year deal where maybe you had a potential out after 2 years, because then you would have him locked up for even longer to have him alongside Will Anderson. That being said, because I like this move a lot, and because my only complaint is that it's only a 2-year deal, you're going to give it a good grade. This is a very good signing. I'm going to give it a simple A. And the last thing that I will be talking about today is the Justin Fields trade to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, one thing I will say is shout out to the Bears. If things are true, the Bears actually traded Justin Fields to a spot that he wanted to go to. It sounds like there were multiple teams that were willing to trade for him, but more than likely it was a scenario where he was just going to be the backup for multiple years. Instead, he's now going to be going to a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are going to be benching him for 1 year to let him learn under Russell Wilson, and then eventually will make him the full-time starter. I think it makes a lot of sense for both Chicago and the Steelers to make this transaction. Did the Bears get absolutely nothing in return for it, basically? Yes, kind of. Based off what I've heard, it appears to be a 6th round pick that can potentially turn into a 4th round pick depending on how much he plays. So if that's the case, then at least you get a 4th round pick. Again, that's really not a whole lot of value in return for him, but based off how his value was tracking, it kind of does make sense. Justin Fields going to the Pittsburgh Steelers is actually a super clutch move for the Steelers. They needed a long-term answer at quarterback, especially after the Kenny Pickett trade. This was a team that just traded for Russell Wilson, and obviously he was not going to be the long-term future plan at quarterback. He's going to be the plan next year, and maybe if things work out tremendously, he could be the plan for 2 years, even 3 years from now. But more than likely, Russell Wilson will play solidly with the Steelers next year, maybe win a playoff game, maybe do even better than that, and then eventually Justin Fields will be the starting quarterback. If that's the case, I like this move a lot. I'm going to give it a very good grade of an A+ for the Steelers and a C+ for the Chicago Bears, simply because the Chicago Bears did right by Justin Fields. But with that all being said, if I missed any moves that you guys want to hear me grade, let me know in the comment section below. We're probably going to have even more moves come up before the draft, so maybe at some point I'll make a part 3 to address some of the smaller deals or even some of the moves that I may have missed in this video. And if you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. But I love you guys. Peace.